Skyroute. The company's sophisticated software was designed to get aircraft to their destinations as cheaply as possible. Taking account of the weather and passenger and cargo payload, 10% of flight costs were incurred in landing fees and overflight charges, 90% in aviation fuel. A strong headwind could add 30% to the cost of a flight and turn it into a loss maker for the company. Finding the cheapest route on a given day was critical. Skyroute had taken account of all the satellite-generated weather data and decided on a southerly course to avoid strong winds in the North Atlantic. They would fly due west from Heathrow, level off at 31,000 feet over the Severn Estuary, and make their way towards the southern tip of Ireland. Midway across the Irish Sea, they would climb to their cruising altitude of 39,000 feet and follow an almost direct line across the ocean. An estimated flight time of 8 hours would have them on the ground at New York's JFK at midday, Eastern Standard Time. Having talked his captain through the main points, Stevens drew his attention to several notices to airmen, NOTAMs, that warned of pockets of thundercloud over the western British Isles and Irish Sea. It was unremarkable weather for the time of year, and nothing to cause either pilot anxiety. Captain Murray had always preferred flying the Atlantic to complex routes over a patchwork of countries. Beyond Irish airspace, there would be no air traffic controllers to deal with until they skirted southern Canada. And once aloft, the Airbus virtually flew itself. In fact, if correctly programmed, it would even land and come to a halt on the JFK runway without human intervention. Satisfied with their proposed course, Murray ordered a second cup of coffee and set about checking the fuel load calculations. Operating on the tightest of margins, Ransom Airways insisted its captains take on only the regulation minimum 3% of total fuel load as a contingency, which amounted to approximately 30 extra minutes in the air. If a captain chose to take on more and didn't use it, he would be fined according to a sliding scale. Every 2 litres of fuel taken on board required another litre just to keep it airborne. Satisfied that there were no weather systems reported over the Atlantic likely to require a significant deviation, Murray confirmed Skyroute's suggested order for 105 tons of kerosene and hit the send button, filing his flight plan with the company dispatcher. It was 90 minutes before takeoff. Greg Patterson was having a bad weekend. His 10-year-old daughter, Amy, was in tears. People were staring, and nothing he said would console her. To make matters worse, he could feel his wife's disapproval across the 3,000 miles of ocean that separated them. Taking the vice president's post in London had seemed to him just the sort of fillip his tired marriage had needed. But Michelle had refused to leave Connecticut. A professor in applied mathematics at Hertford University, she had been offered a visiting lectureship at King's College, London, but when departure day loomed, she claimed she couldn't bring herself to desert her elderly mother. Greg knew full well there was more to it than that, but for the sake of his daughter he had agreed to go alone and to suffer a monthly intercontinental commute. Michelle had brought Amy over for Christmas, but had had to fly home 4 days early to look after her mother, who, with impeccable timing, had broken a hip during her absence. Greg had persuaded Michelle to let Amy stay on, with the promise that he would fly to New York with her en route to a business meeting to Washington. He had seen very little of his daughter during the previous 8 months and relished the prospect of a few days alone with her. All had been well until the previous Friday morning, when, in typically autocratic fashion, Greg's CEO cancelled his Washington trip, dictating that he had more pressing business to attend to in London. Greg had briefly toyed with the crazy idea of flying to New York with Amy on Saturday and back to London 24 hours later, but his plan was skewered when late on Friday evening the airline bumped them onto a Sunday flight, claiming that their Saturday departure had been unwittingly overbooked. Michelle had failed to be understanding. As far as she was concerned, Greg's intention to fly their daughter home as an unaccompanied minor was tantamount to child.